FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
Allow me to bring on right now. He's got music and everything. This is serious. He is a senior fellow in Asian Studies at the American Foreign Policy Council. Worked with Vice President Cheney in the Bush White House, and a former senior policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation after serving in the Department of Defense. He is Stephen Yates. Stephen, how are you, sir? Welcome to the show.
Just fine, Tony. Thank you for having me on.
I know it's not Dana. I know the voice may be throwing you off, but we'll go with it. But you have your own theme music, and that in and of itself, sir, very impressive.
All courtesy of the show.
Let me start by moving us over to Syria and Afghanistan. Senator John McCain with some very, very strong words over the weekend. I'm paraphrasing. His basic statement was, why in the world are we not already engaged in Syria? What the hell are we waiting for? Is my paraphrase accurate, and is Senator McCain correct in his desire?
I think Senator McCain is correct in noting the differences, in some ways contradictions, between the argument that the Obama administration made for intervention in Libya and if you're going to say you're going to try to marshal an international coalition to protect the loss of innocent life in Libya, there's certainly significant evidence of perhaps even more loss of innocent life in Syria. I do think, with due respect to the senator, that there's a wide gap between the kind of no-fly zone intervention types that he has appealed for in Libya and with regard to the tensions in Syria, and the Obama let's talk past the graveyard approach of, we'll call for regime change, but we will do nothing to shape outcomes. Really, we need to be looking at a lot of tools in between and urging allies in the region and empowering them before we even consider what the United States would do directly itself, at least in my opinion.
Well, one of the things Stephen, that you said right there was in the comparison to Libya, where certainly President Obama led from behind. Certainly there was no plan there. But is that a smart tact or a good tact or a reasonable tact for Senator McCain to have? I think it'd be a pretty obvious notion at this moment that nobody's interested in yet another war. This is what's happening, certainly while you can disapprove of it, this is what's happening in another nation and has no effect on American sovereignty or American safety or security. Is the senator playing in a smart sandbox?
Well, I think that he is, in the sense that we do have national interests that are tied to developments in Syria. I mean, Syria is a state sponsor of terrorism. It is responsible for the deaths of many, many American servicemen that fought in Iraq. And it is an ally of Iran, an enemy of Israel, and an enemy of ours. And so the Assad regime is very, very clearly on the enemy side of the ledger. We should take it seriously. It takes us seriously. They'd also been colluding with North Koreans to develop a nuclear site the Israelis were compelled to eliminate in 2007. So I think it certainly rises to the occasion as being worthy of the president's time and attention. It doesn't seem to command that much of it, unfortunately, although I still firmly believe that Senator McCain is a bit further ahead on rallying where America should go and intervene, and less on the side of really figuring out what more could be done to develop the tools to shape political outcomes in these areas. In other words, the president calls for a political outcome. Senator McCain, to a degree, calls for a political outcome. The president backs it up with almost nothing except meetings. Senator McCain talks about the military because it's an area he's intimately familiar. I just think there's a lot more at stake here, and I think America is very hesitant to expand our range of commitments at this point.
We're speaking with Stephen Yates of the American Foreign Policy Council. Let's expand it a little bit, and let's talk about the entire Middle East. You brought up Israel. You brought up the relationship between Syria and Iran recently. China and Russia putting the kibosh on a UN resolution, a Security Council resolution to inflict even further sanctions on Iran. And most recently, you have Turkey. Turkey, a NATO nation. A nation that has been moving more and more Islamist, if you will. You have people like former Colonel Douglas McGregor saying that Iran is not the problem in the region. Turkey is the problem with the region. Huge army moving in this Islamist way. Do you and then you have Turkey most recently saying, to be clear, there will be no NATO sharing with Israel whatsoever. Is a move in Syria going to bring about a possible move from Turkey? And if you're playing chess, Stephen, how does this play out?
Well, I don't know that anyone's ever accused me of being a chess master, but I think that
I didn't say master. I didn't say that you were a guy holed up with a bunch of pigeons in a park in Brooklyn. I'm just questioning. You got more on this than I do, I hope.
Well, I do think that I'm not sure that I'm ready to accept the notion that Turkey is a greater threat to American interests than is the threats posed by Iran and its ally Syria. I do think that we would be doing ourselves a greater service in trying to turn the course in Turkey if we took seriously and took action on the threats that they face, that they would actually recognize as being in their benefit to cooperate with us on. And Syria is one of those threats. I mean, Syria and also Iran. So if we had serious efforts to constrain and hopefully overrun the regimes that are taking action that are hostile to our interests, I think that there is a chance to turn the course in Turkey. I mean, when we have a diplomatic approach where we just sort of leave the chips to fall where they may, we can't really come down so hard on governments like Turkey's about saying, well, if the Americans are going to drift off into their own isolation, then we find ourselves in a region with very different set of choices, and so they begin to act in ways that leave us behind. Now, I don't excuse it. I just think that we need to take those responsibilities a bit more seriously and maybe empower them. Sure, it would be better for the United States for Turkey to be empowered to do something to really change course in Syria than for us to have to be the one to go in and do it.
Stephen Yates, a big debate on Wednesday, a presidential debate in Arizona. One would assume that even though this is going to be an economic election, that these conversation pieces that we're talking about today are going to come up. Based on your thoughts, not saying that you have an intimate knowledge of all the candidates, who has the best idea on foreign policy, Gingrich, Romney, Paul, or Santorum?
Well, I think that you have to look at them in terms of their ideas, but also the degree of faith you have in their capability to deliver. I think when you look at issues unfolding in the world, it's one thing to understand what needs to be done, and then another to truly be capable of executing. And that's where I think that Newt Gingrich stands above the others. Rick Santorum has had some fine things to say about the challenges that Iran poses, and Mitt Romney is capable of having an elegant speech from time to time, but neither of them really understands the full range of things, going from the budget to really entrenched bureaucracies and sort of foreign policy elites that stand in the way of real progress. And when you're looking at volatile regions like the Middle East, an establishment will stand in the way of taking any kind of a risk or really standing for the side of freedom and doing something to shape these outcomes. They also tend to downplay the nature of threats, whether the cyber war from China or the true nature of the Islamist threat to the United States. And so I think that we can count on Newt more than the others to tell the truth about the threats, but also then to have the command over the system and the battle scars to show his willingness to challenge the establishment to get things done. So I'm not unbiased in it. I favor him. And I actually do believe when it comes to being commander-in-chief and executing real change, part of that's going to have to be here at home, and he's the one that has, I think, sufficient experience and a record to actually deliver the change.
Stephen Yates, Senior Fellow in Asian Studies, American Foreign Policy Council. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for taking the time, and look forward to having you back, sir.
Thank you, Tony. Anytime.